They dragged her through the mud while the entire pack watched and laughed. Liora Vance, once promised to be Luna, now collared like an animal, her dignity stripped away in front of hundreds. The alpha, who was supposed to love her, stood silent, his eyes cold as winter stone. They called her wolfless, a stain on their bloodline, a mistake that should have been cold at birth. But tonight, when the Lycan King arrived and every wolf in the territory bowed their heads, he didn't look at the alpha. He didn't look at the warriors or the honored daughters. His ancient, burning gaze found her, the girl they said was nothing, and everything shattered. If you want to see how a broken outcast becomes a queen who reshapes an entire world, stay until the very end. Like this video, comment which city you're watching from, and let's begin her story. The cold always came first in the Ironclaw Mountains. It swept down from the peaks like a living thing, clawing through the pines and rattling the bones of the valley below. Winter didn't ask permission here. It took what it wanted, warmth, comfort, mercy, and left only survival in its place. Liora Vance learned that lesson early. She knelt in the stone courtyard behind the pack house, her knees pressed against frozen ground, scrubbing dried blood from the alpha's hunting leathers. Her fingers were cracked and raw, the skin around her nails split from the lye soap and the relentless cold. The bucket of water beside her had a thin skin of ice forming across the surface. She broke it with her knuckles and kept scrubbing. Above her, through the tall windows of the great hall, she could hear laughter. Music. The pack was celebrating again. Another successful hunt, another rival pack pushed back from their borders. Another reason to feast and drink and remind themselves how strong they were. She wasn't invited. She never was. Faster! Wolfless! The voice came from behind her, sharp and cutting. Liora didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Maris, one of the pack's favored daughters, stood in the doorway with two of her friends. All three wore fine wool dresses dyed in deep forest greens and midnight blues. Their hair was braided with silver thread. They smelled like lavender and wood smoke and entitlement. "You missed a spot," Maris continued, stepping closer. Her boots were polished leather, the kind that cost more than Liora had seen in a year. "Right there, see it?" Leora's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She dipped the leather back into the icy water and scrubbed harder. "I asked you a question, Omega." Liora looked up slowly. Maris was beautiful in the way mountains were beautiful, cold, untouchable, and sharp enough to draw blood if you got too close. Her wolf had come in strong at 13, a silver-coated beast that could run for days without tiring. The pack adored her. Alphas from neighboring territories sent gifts, hoping for a chance to court her. Liora had no wolf at all. "I see it," Liora said quietly. Maris smiled. It wasn't kind. "Good. Then you'll stay out here until it's perfect. We can't have the alpha wearing dirty leathers, can we? What would the other packs think?" One of Maris's friends giggled. "They'd think we let Omegas handle important things." The third girl wrinkled her nose. "I still don't understand why Alpha Rowan hasn't sent her away. She's useless. No wolf, no strength, no purpose. She's a drain on resources." "She was supposed to be his mate," Maris said casually, as if she were discussing the weather. "Can you imagine? A wolfless Luna. The pack would have been a laughingstock." Liora's hands stilled in the water. "Thankfully," Maris continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "he came to his senses before it was too late, rejected her properly, in front of everyone no less. It was the only honorable thing to do." The memory rose up like bile in Liora's throat. She forced it back down and returned to scrubbing. Maris leaned in closer, her breath warm against Liora's frozen cheek. "You should be grateful, you know. Most packs would have killed you by now. Rowan's letting you live. The least you can do is show some gratitude." Liora didn't respond. Maris straightened, brushing imaginary dust from her dress. "Come on," she said to her friends. "The hall's getting stuffy. Let's get some air that doesn't smell like failure." They left laughing, their voices echoing off the stone walls. Liora waited until they were gone before she allowed herself to breathe. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold, not entirely. She looked down at the leather in her grip, at the bloodstains that refused to come clean no matter how hard she worked. Some stains, she'd learned, didn't wash out. They just became part of the fabric. She dipped the leather back into the water and kept scrubbing. The night of the gathering of claws arrived with the first snowfall of the season. Liora watched from the kitchen window as wolves from across the northern territories began to arrive. They came in packs of 10, 20, sometimes more, warriors in ceremonial armor, alphas draped in furs and silver, lunas who moved like dancers even when standing still. The courtyard filled with bodies, with noise, with the electric hum of power, meeting power. The gathering happened once every 5 years. It was tradition, law, and spectacle all at once. A chance for the packs to reaffirm alliances, settle disputes, and remind each other of the hierarchy that kept their world from collapsing into chaos. And at the top of that hierarchy sat the Ironclaw pack. "Stop staring and start moving," snapped the head cook, a stern woman named Briga, who ran the kitchens like a general commanded troops. "Those platters won't carry themselves." Liora turned from the window and lifted a heavy tray laden with roasted venison, root vegetables glazed in honey, and bread still warm from the ovens. The smell made her stomach clench with hunger, but she'd learned long ago not to expect any for herself. The Pax Omegas ate scraps after everyone else was satisfied, if there were scraps. She carried the tray through the back corridors, moving silently through passages designed to keep servants invisible. The great hall was alive with sound. Hundreds of voices layered over each other, punctuated by bursts of laughter and the occasional howl of approval. Firelight danced across the walls. The air was thick with the scent of meat, mead, and dominance. Liora slipped through a side entrance and set the platter down on one of the long tables. No one looked at her. She was furniture here, useful when needed, ignored when not. She turned to leave. "You." The voice stopped her cold. She looked up. Alpha Rowan stood 3 feet away, a goblet of wine in one hand. He was everything an alpha was supposed to be, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. His wolf was legendary, a massive black beast that could tear through enemies like wet paper. He wore authority the way other men wore cloaks. And once, years ago, he'd been promised to her. "Yes, Alpha?" Liora kept her eyes down, her voice neutral. "Refill this?" He thrust the goblet toward her. She took it carefully, avoiding his fingers. "Of course." She started to move away, but his hand shot out and caught her wrist. His grip was iron. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you." Slowly, Liora raised her eyes. Rowan studied her face with the same expression he might use to examine a tool that had stopped working properly. "You're still here. You haven't sent me away, Alpha. Should I?" It wasn't really a question. Liora said nothing. Rowan released her wrist and took a step back, his lip curling slightly. "You were supposed to be strong. Your bloodline was supposed to be pure. My father promised me a mate who could stand beside me, who could give me heirs worthy of leading this pack." Leora's throat tightened, but her voice stayed steady. "I'm sorry I disappointed you." "Sorry." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think sorry fixes anything? You think sorry gives me back the years I wasted believing you'd shift? That you'd become what you were supposed to be?" "No, Alpha." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to something quieter, sharper. "I should have killed you when your wolf never came. It would have been kinder than this, kinder than making you live knowing you're nothing." Something flickered in Leora's chest. Not anger exactly. Anger required energy she didn't have. This was something older, something that had learned to survive on less than scraps. "If you wish to end my service, Alpha, I will accept your judgment." Rowan stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was the cruelest thing she'd seen all night. "No," he said softly. "I think I'll keep you. Someone has to scrub the floors after all, and it's good for the pack to see what happens to weakness. A reminder." He took the goblet back without having her refill it and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Liora stood there, her wrist still burning where he'd grabbed her, and forced herself to breathe. Just keep breathing. That's all you have to do. Just keep breathing. She turned back toward the kitchens, and that's when she felt it. A presence. Not loud, not violent, but undeniable, like the moment before lightning strikes when the air goes sharp and electric. The hall went quiet. Not all at once. It was gradual, like a wave moving through the crowd. Conversations faltered. Laughter died mid-breath. Even the music stumbled and stopped. Liora turned slowly, The main doors of the hall stood open, and framed in the archway was a figure that didn't belong to any pack she'd ever seen. He was tall, taller than Rowan, taller than any alpha in the room. He wore black leather and a cloak lined with fur so dark it seemed to drink the firelight. His hair was the color of iron, swept back from a face carved from stone and shadow. But it was his eyes that made Liora's breath catch. Gold. Not amber. Not yellow. Gold. Pure and molten, like the heart of a forge. And they were looking directly at her. The entire hall held its breath. Alpha Rowan stepped forward, his posture shifting into something more controlled, more wary. "King Darius." He inclined his head, not a bow, but close. "We weren't expecting you." The man, the king, didn't look at Rowan. He was still staring at Liora, his expression unreadable. "I came to see for myself," Darius Blackthorn said, his voice low and rough, like stones grinding together deep underground. "I heard rumors, whispers of an old bloodline hidden in these mountains. I thought they were lies. I assure you, my pack is—" "I'm not talking about your pack." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Then what—" Darius moved. He crossed the hall in seconds, the crowd parting before him like water before a ship's bow. Wolves who would have fought to the death rather than yield pressed themselves against the walls, their eyes wide, their instincts screaming at them to submit. He stopped in front of Liora. Up close, he was overwhelming, not just in size, but in sheer presence. The air around him felt heavier, thicker, like gravity itself bent toward him. "What's your name?" he asked. Liora's voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Liora Vance." "Vance?" He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "That's an old name. Older than this pack. Older than most of the families here." I don't know, my lord. My parents died when I was young. And you never shifted." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "No, my lord." Something flickered in his golden eyes. Not pity, not disgust, something else entirely. "They told you that you were broken," he said quietly. "That you were wolfless, weak." Liora's throat closed. She nodded. Darius reached out slowly, giving her time to step back if she wanted. She didn't move. Couldn't move. His hand touched her chin, tilting her face up toward the light. The moment his skin met hers, the world cracked. Liora gasped, her knees buckling. It felt like fire and ice and lightning all at once, like something ancient and enormous waking up inside her chest and screaming, "Yes, yes, finally, yes." Darius caught her before she fell, his arm steady around her waist. His eyes blazed brighter, and for a heartbeat, Liora saw something ripple beneath his skin, something vast and powerful and other. "You're not wolfless," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent hall. "You're Lycan-born." The room exploded into chaos. Shouts, denials. Rowan's voice rising above the rest, sharp and furious. "That's impossible. She's been tested. There's no—" "She's mine." Darius's words cut through the noise like a blade. The hall went silent again. Rowan stared at the king, his face white with shock. "What did you say?" Darius turned, still holding Liora steady. "I said she's mine, my true mate, and I'm claiming her under the old laws, witnessed by every pack in this hall." "No." Rowan took a step forward, his hands curling into fists. "No, you can't. She's nothing." "She's everything." Darius's voice dropped to something colder, something final. "And if you challenge my claim, Alpha Rowan, I'll kill you where you stand." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Rowan looked around the hall, searching for support, for allies, for anyone willing to stand with him. No one moved. Slowly, Darius reached up and touched the iron collar around Liora's neck, the mark of her Omega status, the symbol of her place at the bottom of the pack hierarchy. His fingers tightened around the metal, and then he pulled. The collar shattered. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent hall. Pieces of iron clattered to the stone floor, ringing like broken bells. Liora touched her throat, feeling bare skin for the first time in years. Darius looked down at her, his expression softening just slightly. "You're free," he said quietly. "And you're mine, if you'll have me." Liora stared up at him, at this stranger, This king, this man who had just torn apart her entire world in a matter of minutes. She should have been afraid. She should have said no. But deep inside her chest, something was waking up. Something that had been sleeping for so long she'd forgotten it existed. Something that recognized him. "Yes," she whispered. Darius smiled, and the Ironclaw pack watched in stunned silence as their king claimed the girl they'd called worthless and carried her out of the hall like she was the most precious thing in the world. Behind them, Alpha Rowan stood frozen, his fists clenched, his pride shattered, and in his eyes burned something dark and dangerous. This wasn't over. The king's quarters were in the eastern wing of the pack house, a section reserved for visiting dignitaries and powerful allies. Liora had cleaned these rooms 100 times, but never imagined she'd step inside them as anything other than a servant. Now she stood in the center of a bedroom larger than the entire servants' quarters, watching as Darius closed and locked the door behind them. The silence was overwhelming. "Are you afraid?" he asked without turning around. Liora considered lying. "Yes." "Good." He turned to face her. "Fear means you're smart. It means you understand what just happened." "I'm not sure I do." Darius crossed the room and poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher. He handed one to her. "Drink. You're shaking." She was. She took the glass and drank, the cold water shocking against her throat where the collar used to sit. "What did you mean?" she asked quietly. "When you said I was Lycan born." Darius sat down in one of the chairs near the fireplace, gesturing for her to do the same. She perched on the edge of the other chair, every muscle in her body coiled tight. "Lycans are the old blood," he said. "We're what wolves were before the packs fractured and weakened. Stronger, faster, harder to kill, and much, much rarer. But I've never shifted. I've never felt a wolf inside me. Because your wolf isn't just a wolf." He leaned forward, his golden eyes intense. Lycan transformations don't happen at puberty, like normal shifts. They happen when the person is ready, when they're strong enough to survive the change. Some Lycans don't shift until they're in their 20s. Some never shift at all because they die before they're ready. Liora's hand tightened around the glass. "How do you know I'm Lycan?" "Because I felt it the moment I touched you." His voice went softer. "The bond between true mates is absolute. It doesn't lie. And when I touched you, I felt something ancient recognize me. Something that's been waiting." "For what?" "For me." He smiled slightly. "And for you to be ready to become what you were always meant to be." Liora stared into her glass, watching the firelight dance across the surface of the water. "Why me? Why now?" "I've been searching for you for 3 years, Darius said. "I had dreams. Visions of a girl with dark hair and silver eyes standing in the snow. I knew she was my mate, but I didn't know where to find her. Every pack I visited, I searched. Every gathering, every territory. Nothing." He paused. "Until tonight. The moment I walked through those doors, I knew. Your scent hit me like lightning." "I don't smell like anything," Liora said quietly. "The Omegas all say I barely have a scent at all." "To them, maybe. To me?" His eyes darkened. "You smell like winter storms and wild honey, like something worth burning the world down to protect." Heat crept up Liora's neck. She looked away. "You don't have to accept this," Darius said. "The bond, the claim, it's real, but I won't force it on you. If you want to walk away, I'll let you go. I'll make sure you're safe, that you have resources, that no pack can touch you. You'll be free." Liora looked up sharply. "You'd let me go? After all that? After claiming me in front of everyone? I'd rather have you free and alive than bound to me against your will." For a long moment, Liora just stared at him. This man, this king, who had shattered her collar and her life in the same breath, was giving her a choice. A real one. No one had ever given her a choice before. "What happens if I stay?" she asked. "You become my mate, my queen. You leave this pack and come with me to my territory. You'll be protected, honored, and when your wolf finally emerges, you'll be trained to use your power." He held her gaze. "And you'll never bow to anyone again." The words hit her like a physical blow. Never bow again. Liora thought of Rowan's face when he'd rejected her, of Maris's mocking laughter, of every cold night spent scrubbing floors while the pack feasted above her. Of the collar that had marked her as less for so long, she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to stand straight. "I'll stay," she said. Darius's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went warm. "You're sure?" "No." She laughed slightly, the sound shaky. "But I'm choosing it anyway." He stood and crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye to eye. "Then I swear to you, Liora Vance, I will keep you safe. I will stand between you and anything that tries to harm you, and I will wait as long as it takes for you to trust me." He offered his hand. Liora looked at it, scarred, strong, steady. She took it. The bond flared again, gentler this time, like embers instead of wildfire. Warm. Right. Darius smiled. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow, we leave at first light, and tomorrow night you'll never have to see this place again." Liora nodded, exhaustion suddenly crashing over her like a wave. Darius stood and moved toward the door. "I'll sleep in the sitting room. You take the bed." "You don't have to." "I do." He looked back at her, his expression serious. "You've been hurt enough, Liora. I'm not adding to that. Not tonight. Not ever." He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Liora sat alone in the firelight, staring at the door, at the space where the king had just been. And for the first time in years, she let herself cry. Not from pain, from hope. Dawn came gray and cold, the sky heavy with the promise of more snow. Liora woke to find a set of clean clothes laid out on a chair near the bed, soft leather pants, a wool tunic, and a cloak lined with fur. Real traveling clothes, not servant rags. She dressed quickly, her fingers fumbling with the unfamiliar laces. When she emerged from the bedroom, Darius was waiting. He'd already packed, his belongings reduced to a single leather saddlebag. He looked up when she entered and nodded approvingly. "Good. You'll need warm clothes where we're going." "Where are we going?" "North, to the Blackthorn stronghold. It's a week's journey on foot, less if we push hard." Liora swallowed. "A week? Are you strong enough?" She thought of all the miles she'd walked serving this pack, all the heavy loads she'd carried, all the nights she'd worked until her body gave out. "Yes." "Then let's go." They left through a side entrance, avoiding the main courtyard. But they didn't make it far. Alpha Rowan stood blocking the path, flanked by a dozen of his strongest warriors. They were armed, not with ceremonial weapons, but with real blades, real axes, the kind meant for killing. Darius stopped. His hand moved to the sword at his hip. "Step aside, Rowan." "No." Rowan's voice was flat, cold. "You came into my pack house, humiliated me in front of every alpha in the north, and stole what was mine. She was never yours. She was promised to me. And you threw her away like garbage." Darius's voice went deadly quiet. "You don't get to reclaim trash just because someone else saw value in it." Rowan's face went white with rage. "I invoke my right under the old laws. Trial by combat. If you want her, you'll have to take her." The warriors behind him shifted, hands moving to weapons. Darius didn't move. "You're challenging a Lycan King to single combat over a mate bond?" "I'm challenging you," Rowan snarled, "because you're not the only one with pride. You think you can walk in here and take whatever you want? You think power makes you untouchable?" "No." Darius smiled, and it was a terrible thing to see. "I think stupidity makes you suicidal." He turned slightly, his eyes finding Liora. "Get behind me. Stay close." She moved immediately, her heart hammering. Rowan laughed. "What? The great king needs to protect his wolfless mate? Some queen she'll make—" Darius moved so fast Liora barely saw it. One moment he was standing beside her. The next, he was across the courtyard, his hand wrapped around Rowan's throat, lifting the alpha off the ground like he weighed nothing. "Call her that again," Darius said softly, "and I'll rip your spine out through your mouth." He dropped Rowan, who collapsed to his knees, gasping. The warriors drew their weapons, and Darius shifted. Liora had seen wolves shift before. She'd watched dozens of transformations, from the clumsy first changes of adolescence to the fluid grace of seasoned warriors. This was nothing like that. Darius's shift was violent, primal, impossible. His body didn't just change, it exploded outward, bones cracking and reforming, muscle and fur erupting from skin that split and healed in the same instant. In seconds, where the man had stood, there was now a beast. Not a wolf, a Lycan. It was massive, easily 9 feet tall at the shoulder, with fur the color of storm clouds and eyes that burned gold like furnaces. Its claws were the length of daggers. Its teeth could have crushed stone, and it stood between Liora and the warriors like a mountain made of rage. Rowan stared up at the creature, all color draining from his face. "Shift!" Darius's voice came from the beast's throat, deeper than thunder. "All of you, shift and face me if you have the courage." None of them moved. One of the warriors dropped his axe, then another, then the rest, the weapons clattering to the frozen ground. Darius shifted back, the transformation somehow even more disturbing in reverse. He stood naked in the snow for a moment before pulling on his clothes with casual efficiency. "That's what I thought." He looked at Rowan, who was still on his knees. "Your challenge is noted and declined. Under the old laws, you have no claim on her. She's mine. And if you ever come near her again, I'll kill you and every wolf stupid enough to follow you." He walked back to Liora and offered his hand. "Come on, we're leaving." She took his hand, her own trembling. They walked past the warriors, past Rowan, past the pack house, where she'd spent years being invisible. No one tried to stop them. At the edge of the courtyard, Liora looked back one last time. The entire pack had gathered to watch them leave, hundreds of wolves, all standing in silence. And in that silence, Liora realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was done. They walked for hours in silence, leaving the Ironclaw territory behind. The forest closed around them, pine and stone and snow, the world reduced to gray and white, and the sound of their boots crunching through ice. Finally, as the sun reached its pale zenith, Darius called for a rest. They stopped beside a frozen stream, and he built a small fire with practiced efficiency. Liora sat on a fallen log, watching him work. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not killing him." Darius looked up, his expression unreadable. "I wanted to." "I know. But you didn't want me to." It wasn't a question. Liora shook her head. "He's not worth it. Killing him would just make him a martyr. Let him live knowing he lost." Darius smiled slightly. "You're smarter than he deserves." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. "What happens now?" Liora asked eventually. "Now we go home. You meet my pack, our pack. You learn what it means to be Lycan, and when your wolf is ready to emerge, I'll be there to guide you through it. And if she never emerges, then you'll still be my mate, my queen, and the strongest person I know." He met her eyes. "Your worth isn't tied to your wolf, Liora. It's tied to who you are, and who you are is remarkable." Liora felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been frozen for so long she'd forgotten it could thaw. "I don't know how to be a queen," she whispered. "Neither did I when I became king." Darius stood and crossed to her, kneeling so they were level. "But I learned, and so will you, together." He offered his hand again. This time, when Liora took it, she didn't let go. They stayed like that for a long moment, the fire warm, the world quiet, the future uncertain but no longer terrifying. And somewhere deep inside Liora's chest, something ancient stirred, waiting, watching, ready. The Blackthorn stronghold rose from the northern wilderness like a fortress carved from the mountain itself. Stone walls thick as ancient trees, watchtowers that pierced the low-hanging clouds, and gates reinforced with iron that had seen centuries of war. This wasn't just a pack house. This was a kingdom. Liora stood at the forest's edge, staring up at the massive structure, and felt her throat go dry. "It's bigger than I expected," she said quietly. Darius stood beside her, his cloak dusted with snow from their week-long journey. "It has to be. We protect 17 territories from here. Nearly 4,000 wolves answer to this stronghold." 4,000. Liora had grown up in a pack of 300 and thought that was overwhelming. "They're going to hate me," she whispered. Darius looked at her sharply. "Why would you say that?" "Because I'm wolfless. Because I came from a pack that treated me like dirt. Because you're their king and I'm—" She stopped, unable to finish. "You're my mate," Darius said firmly, "and that makes you their queen. They'll respect that, or they'll answer to me." He started walking toward the gates. Liora hesitated for only a moment before following. The gates opened as they approached, pulled by guards in dark leather armor bearing the blackthorn sigil, a wolf's head crowned with thorns. The guards saluted Darius with fists over their hearts, then their eyes slid to Liora with open curiosity. Inside the walls, the stronghold was a small city unto itself. Stone buildings pressed close together, smoke rising from 100 chimneys. Wolves moved through the streets with purpose, warriors training in open courtyards, merchants hawking furs and weapons, children darting between adults' legs in some game only they understood. And every single one of them stopped to stare as Darius and Liora passed. The whispers started immediately. "Is that her? The one from the gathering? She doesn't look like much. I heard she's wolfless." "No wolf at all? And he claimed her?" Liora kept her eyes forward and her spine straight, but each whisper felt like a blade between her ribs. Darius's hand found hers and squeezed once. A silent reminder, "I'm here." They climbed the steps to the main keep, a massive structure at the stronghold's heart. Inside, the walls were lined with tapestries depicting battles, hunts, and ceremonies stretching back generations. Torches burned in iron sconces. The air smelled of wood smoke, steel, and power. A woman appeared at the top of the staircase, tall, sharp-featured, with silver hair braided into an intricate crown. She wore deep crimson robes that swept the floor as she descended, and her eyes were the same molten gold as Darius's. "Mother," Darius said, inclining his head slightly. "Mother." Leora's stomach dropped. The woman stopped 3 steps from the bottom, studying Liora with an intensity that made her want to shrink. "So this is the girl who's turned the North upside down." "This is Liora," Darius said. "My mate." "Liora, this is Cassandra Blackthorn, Queen Mother of the Lycan territories." Cassandra descended the final steps slowly, circling Liora like a predator assessing prey. "Vance, that's an old bloodline. I knew your grandmother, I think. Skilled healer, died young." Liora blinked. "You knew her?" "I know everyone worth knowing." Cassandra stopped in front of her. "And I know you've never shifted, never felt your wolf, never shown any sign of Lycan blood despite carrying one of the oldest names in the North." "Mother." Darius's voice held a warning. Cassandra held up a hand. "I'm not attacking her, Darius. I'm stating facts." She looked back at Liora. "You understand what position you're in, don't you? The wolves here follow strength. They respect power. And you, right now, appear to have neither." "I know," Liora said quietly. "Do you?" Cassandra leaned in closer. "Because if you can't shift, if you can't defend yourself, if you can't command respect on your own merit, then you'll be seen as a weakness. My son's weakness. And wolves don't forgive weakness in their leaders." "Cassandra," Darius's voice went hard. "That's enough." "No, it's not." Cassandra straightened, her expression softening just slightly. She needs to understand what she's walking into. This isn't the Ironclaw pack where she could hide in the shadows. Here, she'll be visible, watched, judged. Every mistake will be magnified. Every failure will reflect on you. She turned to Darius. "I'm not saying she shouldn't be here. I'm saying she needs to be ready for what comes next." Darius's jaw was tight. "She's stronger than you think." "I hope so." Cassandra looked at Liora one more time. "For both your sakes." She swept past them, her robes trailing like blood across the stone floor. Liora released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Don't listen to her," Darius said immediately. She's right." Liora looked up at him. "I'm not strong, not yet. Everyone can see it." "Then we'll make you strong." "How?" Darius smiled grimly. "The same way everyone gets strong in the North, through survival." But the quarters Darius led her to were in the highest tower of the keep, spacious rooms with windows overlooking the entire stronghold. A fire roared in the hearth, furs covered the bed. It was warm and safe and utterly foreign. "This is yours," Darius said. "Well, ours, but you can have your own space if you need it. There's a sitting room through that door and—" "It's perfect," Liora interrupted. "Really?" He studied her face. "You're scared. Terrified. Good." He crossed to a cabinet and pulled out a bundle wrapped in leather. "Then you're thinking clearly." He unwrapped it, revealing a blade, Not large, maybe the length of her forearm, but beautifully made. The steel was dark, almost black, and the handle was wrapped in worn leather. "This was my sister's," Darius said quietly. "Before she died. She was small, like you. Fast. Relied on speed and precision instead of brute strength." Liora took the blade carefully. It was lighter than she expected, balanced perfectly in her hand. "I don't know how to fight." "You will." Darius moved to the window, looking out over his territory. "Training starts tomorrow. Combat, strategy, pack law, everything you'll need to survive here. It won't be easy." "I know." "The wolves will test you. They'll push. They'll want to see if you break. Will you be there?" "Not always." He turned back to her. "That's the point. You need to prove you can stand on your own. If they think you're only strong because of me, they'll never respect you." Liora looked down at the blade in her hands. "What if I fail?" "Then you get back up and try again." Darius crossed to her, tilting her chin up gently. "You survived years in a pack that wanted you to disappear. You're still here, still fighting. That's not weakness, Liora. That's the kind of strength that doesn't break." She wanted to believe him. She wanted it desperately. But when she looked out the window at the sprawling stronghold below, at the thousands of wolves who would be watching her, judging her, waiting for her to fail, she wasn't sure belief was enough. Morning came too soon. Liora woke to someone pounding on the door. She scrambled out of bed, still wearing the clothes from the day before, and opened it to find a woman standing in the hallway. She was short, muscular, with scars crossing both arms, and a face that looked like it had been in more fights than Liora had seen in her entire life. Her hair was cropped close to her skull, and her eyes were hard as iron. "You're the new queen," the woman said. Not a question. Yes, I'm Liora. Kira." The woman didn't offer her hand. "I'm your combat trainer, King's orders. Get dressed. We start in 10 minutes. 10, but I just woke. 9 minutes now." Kira turned and walked away. Liora stared after her, then scrambled to find something to wear. She settled on the leather pants and tunic from the day before, tied her hair back, and grabbed the blade Darius had given her. She found Kira waiting in one of the training courtyards, a large space ringed with wooden posts and weapon racks. Several other wolves were already there, going through morning drills. They all stopped to watch as Liora approached. "You're late," Kira said. "I'm not. You said, if you're not early, you're late." Kira gestured to the center of the courtyard. "Drop the blade. We start with basics." Liora set the weapon down carefully and moved to where Kira indicated. "Stance!" Kira barked. Liora tried to mimic the fighting stance she'd seen warriors use. Feet apart, knees bent, hands up. Kira circled her slowly. "Your feet are too close. Your weight's all wrong. Your guard's too high. Fix it." Liora adjusted. "Worse. Again." She tried again. "Did you learn nothing in your old pack?" "I wasn't allowed to train," Liora said quietly. "Omegas didn't. I don't care what Omegas did or didn't do." Kira stopped in front of her. "You're not an Omega anymore. You're supposed to be a queen, so act like it." Heat crept up Liora's neck. Around them, the other wolves had stopped pretending to train and were openly watching. "Again," Kira said. "Feet apart, bend your knees, center your weight." Liora tried to follow the instructions, but her body felt clumsy, uncoordinated. Kira sighed. "All right, let's try something simpler. Hit me." Liora blinked. "What?" "Hit me. Anywhere, as hard as you can. I don't want to hurt you." "You won't." Kira's smile was razor sharp. "But I'm curious if you even know how to make a proper fist." Liora's hands curled. She could feel every eye on her, every silent judgment. She swung. Kira caught her wrist effortlessly and twisted. Liora yelped as she was spun around and forced to her knees. "Terrible form," Kira said conversationally. Telegraphed the punch. "No power behind it. Thumb tucked inside your fist. You'd break it on impact." She released Liora and stepped back. "Get up. Try again." Liora stood, her face burning. "Again!" She swung again. Kira dodged and swept Liora's legs out from under her. She hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the air from her lungs. "Again!" Liora got up, her hands shaking now. She tried a different approach, faster, lower. Kira blocked and pushed. Liora stumbled backward into one of the wooden posts. Again! Around them, some of the wolves were laughing now. Not cruelly exactly, but not kindly either. Maybe the king made a mistake, someone muttered. How's she supposed to lead if she can't even throw a punch? This is embarrassing. Liora's vision blurred, not from tears, from rage. She launched herself at Kira with everything she had. No technique, no strategy, just raw desperation. Kira sidestepped, and Liora crashed into the dirt. Pathetic, someone said. That word. That specific word. It was the same word Rowan had used. The same word she'd heard whispered behind her back for years. Pathetic. Worthless. Broken. Something inside Liora snapped. She surged to her feet and threw herself at Kira again, but this time she didn't try to punch. She dove low, wrapped her arms around Kira's legs, and used her entire body weight to bring the larger woman down. They hit the ground together. Liora scrambled on top, using momentum instead of strength, and managed to pin Kira's shoulders for exactly half a second before Kira reversed the hold and flipped her onto her back. But for that half second, she'd done it. The courtyard went silent. Kira stood up slowly, looking down at Liora with an expression that might have been surprise. Better, she said. Liora lay in the dirt, breathing hard, her entire body screaming. Kira offered a hand. You don't fight like a wolf. You fight like prey trying not to die. But that's something I can work with. Liora took the hand and let herself be pulled up. Same time tomorrow, Kira said, and every day after until you stop embarrassing yourself. She walked away, and the other wolves gradually returned to their own training. Liora stood alone in the center of the courtyard, covered in dirt and bruises, and realized something. She'd survived her first day. Barely. But she'd survived. Whoa. The days blurred together after that. Dawn training with Kira. Afternoons learning pack law with Cassandra, who had a teaching style that involved asking impossible questions and looking disappointed with every answer. Evenings with Darius, who quizzed her on territories, alliances, and the complex web of politics that held the Lycan kingdoms together. And through it all, the wolves watched. She felt their eyes everywhere. In the training yard, in the great hall during meals, in the corridors when she passed. Always watching, always judging. Most didn't speak to her directly, but their silence was louder than any insult. After 2 weeks, Liora could hold a basic fighting stance without Kira correcting her every 5 seconds. After 3, she'd learned to recognize the 12 primary Lycan bloodlines by scent alone. After 4, she could recite the old laws from memory. But she still hadn't shifted, and everyone knew it. The queen's still wolfless, she heard one warrior whisper to another in the armory. How long until the king realizes he made a mistake? Maybe she's cursed. Maybe that's why her wolf won't come. Or maybe she never had one to begin with. Liora learned to keep walking, to keep her face neutral, to pretend she didn't hear. But she heard everything. One evening, nearly a month after her arrival, Darius found her in the tower library, a small room filled with ancient texts and maps. She was supposed to be studying territorial boundaries. Instead, she was staring out the window at the training yard below, where wolves were sparring under torchlight. You're avoiding dinner, Darius said from the doorway. I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten all day. Liora didn't respond. Darius crossed the room and stood beside her, following her gaze. Talk to me. I'm failing, she said quietly. Everyone knows it. I can barely defend myself. I still can't shift. Your mother looks at me like I'm a temporary problem she's waiting to solve, and your wolves, her voice cracked. They don't respect me. They tolerate me because of you, but the moment you're not there, they need time. It's been a month. For them, that's nothing. Darius turned her to face him. Liora, you're learning in weeks what most of them learned over years. You're doing everything I asked and more. Why can't you see that? Because it's not enough. The words burst out of her. I'm not enough. I'm still the wolfless girl who couldn't protect herself, who needed you to save her, who... A howl cut through the night. Not a normal howl. This was wrong, sharp, distorted, full of pain and rage. Darius went rigid. That's the southern boundary. Another howl joined the first, then another. Rogues, Darius breathed. They're attacking. He turned and ran. Liora didn't think, she just followed, her heart hammering. They burst out into the courtyard where warriors were already mobilizing, pulling on armor and grabbing weapons. Kira appeared, her face grim. "How many?" Darius demanded. "At least 30? Maybe more?" They hit the patrol at the southern gate. "Casualties?" "3 dead, 2 wounded. The gates breached." Darius swore. "Full mobilization. I want every warrior on the walls, archers to the towers. Kira, you're with me." "My lord," Kira hesitated. "What about the queen?" Every warrior in the courtyard turned to look at Liora. Darius's jaw tightened. "She stays in the keep, protected." "No." Liora's voice came out stronger than she felt. "If I hide every time there's danger, they'll never respect me." "This isn't about respect." "Yes, it is." She met his eyes. "I can't fight like them. I can't shift. But I can help. I know healing. I can tend the wounded." "Liora, please." She gripped his arm. "Let me do something. Let me be useful." For a long moment, Darius stared at her. Then he turned to Kira. "She goes to the healing ward. Keep 2 guards on her at all times. Understand?" Kira nodded. "If anything happens to her, it won't." Darius looked at Liora one more time, something complicated passing across his face. Then he shifted, that violent, impossible transformation, and led a wave of warriors toward the southern wall. Kira grabbed Liora's arm. "Come on, stay close and don't do anything stupid." They ran through the stronghold as alarm bells rang and wolves poured into the streets. The healing ward was a long stone building near the western wall, already filling with injured warriors being carried in on stretchers. The head healer, a stern woman named Brenna, looked up as Liora entered. "What's she doing here?" Brenna demanded. "King's orders," Kira said. "She's helping." "I don't need help from someone who can't—" "Then pretend I'm not here," Liora interrupted. "Just tell me what to do." Brenna stared at her, then gestured sharply to a warrior lying on a table. "Clean that wound. Stop the bleeding. Don't let him die." Liora moved immediately. The warrior's side was torn open, claw marks, deep and vicious. He was conscious, but barely, his face gray with pain. Liora's hands shook as she grabbed clean cloth and pressed it against the wound. Blood soaked through immediately. "More pressure," Brenna snapped from across the room, where she was stitching another warrior's arm. "You're letting him bleed out." Liora pressed harder. The warrior groaned. "I know," she whispered. "I'm sorry. Stay with me." She worked frantically, cleaning the wound, stitching where she could, bandaging what she couldn't fix. Her hands were slick with blood, her clothes were soaked. But the bleeding slowed, stopped. The warrior's breathing steadied. "Next one," Brenna called. Liora moved to the next table, and the next, and the next. Hours blurred together. More wounded came in. Some she could save, some she couldn't. A young wolf, barely 20, died on the table while she tried desperately to stop the bleeding from his throat. She felt his last breath against her hands and had to force herself to move to the next patient. There wasn't time to grieve, there was only time to survive. Dawn came slowly, the sky turning from black to gray to pale gold. The attack was over. Liora stood in the healing ward covered in blood that wasn't hers, her entire body trembling with exhaustion. Around her, wounded warriors lay in neat rows. Some would heal, some wouldn't. But they were alive. She'd kept them alive. Darius appeared in the doorway, still in his Lycan form, his fur matted with blood and snow. He shifted back, his eyes finding her immediately. "Are you hurt?" Liora shook her head. She tried to speak, but no words came. Darius crossed to her in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. She collapsed against him, her legs finally giving out. "I've got you," he murmured. "It's over. You're safe." "The warriors? You saved them." Brenna's voice came from behind them. 15 warriors came through that door, who should have died. "You kept them breathing long enough for me to work. That's not nothing." Liora looked up at the healer who was watching her with something that might have been respect. "Thank you," Liora whispered. Brenna nodded once and returned to her patients. Darius lifted Liora easily, carrying her toward the door. "Let's get you cleaned up." As they left the healing ward, Liora saw them, dozens of warriors lining the path, watching in silence. And as Darius carried her past, one by one, They placed their fists over their hearts. A salute. Not for a king's mate. For a healer who'd stood beside them when it mattered. Liora closed her eyes and finally let herself breathe. She'd survived. And this time, she'd done it on her own terms. The respect lasted exactly 3 days. On the 4th morning after the rogue attack, Liora woke to find a dead crow nailed to her door. Its wings were spread wide, pinned with iron spikes, and around its neck hung a collar made of twisted wire, a crude mockery of the one she'd worn in the Ironclaw pack. She stood in the hallway staring at it, her stomach turning. Darius appeared behind her, his face going dark when he saw the display. He tore it down with one violent motion, crushing the wire collar in his fist. "Who did this?" His voice was deadly quiet. "I don't know," Liora said. "I'll find out." "It doesn't matter." "The hell it doesn't." "Darius." She turned to face him. "If you punish someone every time they disrespect me, they'll never respect me. They'll just fear you. There's a difference." His jaw worked. "They can't treat you like this. They saved my life during that attack. Or at least they didn't let me die." She managed a weak smile. "That's progress." But they both knew it wasn't enough. The whispers continued, the sideways glances, the warriors who fell silent when she entered a room, only to resume their conversations the moment she left. She'd proven she could be useful in a crisis, but useful wasn't the same as strong. And in the Lycan territories, strength was the only currency that mattered. Kira pushed her harder in training, as if trying to compress years of learning into weeks. Liora's body was a patchwork of bruises. Her hands were calloused and split. She could hold her own against Kira for almost 30 seconds now before being knocked flat. 30 seconds. It felt both like an eternity and nothing at all. "You're thinking too much," Kira said one afternoon, circling her in the training yard. "Stop trying to anticipate, just react." "I'm trying," Kira struck. Liora barely blocked, her arms jarring from the impact. "Trying isn't doing. Again." They went another round, then another. By the end, Liora was on her knees in the dirt, gasping for air. "You're getting better," Kira said. "But better isn't good enough, not for what's coming." Liora looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" Kira's expression was grim. "The Winter Conclave. It's in 2 weeks." The what?" "Every 5 years, all the Lycan territories gather for the Conclave. It's like the gathering of claws, but bigger, more brutal. Kings challenge each other. Old grudges get settled. New alliances are formed." She paused. "And everyone will be watching you." Liora's blood went cold. "Watching me why?" "Because you're the king's mate who can't shift. Because half the territories think Darius made a mistake claiming you. Because if someone wants to weaken his position, attacking you is the easiest way to do it." "Attacking me how?" Kira didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was careful. "There are laws. Old laws about mates who can't fulfill their duties. If a queen can't shift, can't defend herself, can't produce heirs, other wolves can challenge the bond, force the king to reject her or fight to keep her." The world tilted. "Darius didn't tell me this." "Probably didn't want to worry you." Kira offered a hand and pulled Liora to her feet. "But you need to know. The Conclave isn't just politics, it's a blood sport, and you're going to be right in the middle of it." That night, Liora confronted Darius in their quarters. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded. He was standing by the window staring out at the snow-covered mountains. He didn't turn around. "Tell you what?" "About the Conclave, about the challenges, about the fact that someone could legally force you to reject me." His shoulders tensed. "Who told you? Does it matter? Is it true?" Silence. "Darius." He turned slowly. "It's an old law. It's barely ever invoked. But it could be." "Yes." Liora felt something crack inside her chest. "So all of this, the training, the healing, trying to prove myself, it might not even matter. Someone could just challenge us, and I wouldn't let that happen." "How? If it's law?" "Then I'd break the law." His voice was steel. "I'd burn every tradition to ash before I let anyone take you from me." "And then what? You'd be branded an oathbreaker. Your wolves would lose faith, the territories would fracture, everything you've built would collapse." She shook her head. "I won't let you destroy yourself for me." Darius crossed the room in 2 strides and cupped her face in his hands. Listen to me. I've spent my entire life following rules, maintaining order, being the king everyone needed me to be. And I was empty. Hollow. Until I found you. Darius, I don't care about the law. I don't care about tradition. I care about you. And if the entire North has to burn for me to keep you safe, then I'll light the match myself. Liora stared up at him, seeing the truth blazing in his golden eyes. He meant every word, and that terrified her more than anything. Then we make sure it doesn't come to that, she said quietly. We find another way. What way? I don't know yet, but we have 2 weeks to figure it out. The Blackthorn stronghold transformed over the next 13 days. Delegations arrived from every corner of the Lycan territories. The Iron Ridge Pack from the eastern mountains, the Shadowfen Wolves from the marshlands, the Winterborn clan from the frozen tundra beyond the northern border. Each group brought warriors, advisors, and enough political baggage to sink a ship. The stronghold swelled to nearly 8,000 wolves. Temporary camps sprouted outside the walls. The Great Hall hosted feast after feast, each one a delicate dance of dominance and diplomacy. And through it all, Liora felt the weight of 1,000 eyes. Some were curious, some were hostile, but all of them were waiting for her to fail. Cassandra found her in the library on the 3rd day of arrivals. You're hiding, the Queen Mother said without preamble. I'm studying. Liora gestured to the pile of texts in front of her. Histories of past conclaves, records of challenges, anything that might give her an edge. Cassandra moved one of the books aside and sat down across from her. Let me save you some time. You're looking for a precedent, a way to avoid the challenge without Darius having to fight or reject you. Yes. There isn't one. Leora's hand stilled. There has to be. Every documented case of a challenged mate bond ends one of 3 ways. The king fights and wins, the king fights and loses, or the king rejects the mate before the challenge can be made. Cassandra's expression was unreadable. Those are your only options. Then I'll make a 4th option. How? I don't know yet. Cassandra studied her for a long moment. You remind me of myself at your age, stubborn, idealistic, convinced that sheer willpower could reshape reality. She stood. It usually can't, but occasionally, very occasionally, it does. So prove me wrong, Liora Vance. I'd like to be surprised. She left, her robes whispering against the stone floor. Liora returned to her books, reading until her eyes burned and the words blurred together. Somewhere in these pages, there had to be an answer. There had to be. The night before the conclave's formal opening, Liora couldn't sleep. She stood on the tower balcony, wrapped in a fur cloak, watching the camps below. Thousands of fires burned against the darkness. Thousands of wolves, all gathered for spectacle and bloodshed. You should be resting. She turned to find Kira leaning against the doorway. Can't, Liora said simply. Kira moved to stand beside her. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. Politics in the morning, ceremonial challenges in the afternoon, feast at night, and the real challenges start the day after. How long do we have before someone challenges our bond? Not long. There's already talk. The Iron Ridge Alpha's been vocal about it, says Darius's judgment is compromised, that a wolfless queen weakens all the territories. And what do you think? Kira was quiet for a moment. I think you're stronger than you give yourself credit for. And I think you're going to surprise everyone. I can't even shift. Maybe that's not the kind of strength you need. Liora looked at her sharply. What do you mean? But Kira just shook her head. Get some sleep, Queen. Tomorrow changes everything. She left Liora alone with her thoughts and the cold. The conclave opened with ceremony. All the kings and their mates gathered in the Great Hall, arrayed on tiered platforms according to territory size and power. The Blackthorn throne sat highest, with Darius in full ceremonial armor, black leather and silver mail that caught the torchlight like starlight. Liora sat beside him in a dress Cassandra had chosen, deep midnight blue with silver embroidery, elegant but not ostentatious. Her hands were folded in her lap to hide their shaking. Below them, hundreds of wolves filled the hall. The air was electric with tension. The master of ceremonies, an ancient wolf with white hair and scars covering half his face, stepped forward. Let the conclave begin, he intoned. Let old debts be settled. Let new bonds be forged. Let the strong rise and the weak fall. The crowd roared approval. One by one, the kings stood and announced their territory's accomplishments, their grievances, their challenges. Most were formalities. Some were veiled threats. Then Alpha Varen of the Iron Ridge pack stood. He was massive even by Lycan standards, with copper-red hair and eyes like heated metal. His voice carried across the hall with ease. I bring a challenge, he said, not of territory, not of honor, but of law. The hall went silent. Varen's gaze locked on Darius. King Blackthorn, you have claimed a mate who cannot shift, who has shown no Lycan blood, who, by all observable measures, is human in all but name. Darius's hand tightened on the arm of his throne. Choose your next words very carefully, Varen. The old laws are clear. A queen must be able to defend her territory, produce strong heirs, and lead beside her king. Your mate can do none of these things. He spread his hands. I challenge her right to the Blackthorn throne. Either she proves her strength before this conclave, or you release her and choose a mate worthy of your station. The hall erupted. Some wolves shouted agreement. Others roared opposition. Fights nearly broke out in several sections. Darius stood slowly, his presence silencing the chaos. You dare! I invoke the old laws, Varen said calmly, witnessed by every king here. The challenge is made. She has until the blood moon, 3 days hence, to prove herself. If she cannot, the law demands you reject her or forfeit your crown. Liora felt the blood drain from her face. 3 days. Darius turned to her, his expression anguished. Liora, what does prove herself mean? Leora's voice came out steadier than she felt. She stood, facing Varen directly. Specifically, what are the terms? Varen smiled. It wasn't kind. Simple. You shift. Show us your wolf. Prove you're Lycan, not human. Do that and I withdraw the challenge. And if I can't? Then you're no queen. Just a pretty lie, the Blackthorn King told himself. Rage flashed hot through Leora's veins. Not at the insult, she'd heard worse. At the calculated cruelty of it, at the trap he'd laid that had no escape. I accept your challenge, she heard herself say. The hall exploded again. Darius grabbed her arm. Liora, no. 3 days, she said, meeting Varen's gaze across the hall. I'll give you your proof. Varen's smile widened. I look forward to it, little queen. He sat down, victory already written across his face. Darius pulled Liora back to her seat, his voice urgent and low. What are you doing? You can't… I know. She kept her voice equally quiet. But what choice do we have? If I refuse, he'll say I'm weak. If you fight him over this, other territories will claim you're defying the laws. This way, at least I control the terms. But you can't shift… Not yet. She looked at him. But maybe I can learn. You said Lycan transformations happen when the person is ready. Maybe I just need the right push. Liora, that's not how it works. You can't force… Then I'll find another way. She squeezed his hand once, then released it. Trust me. His eyes searched hers. Always. But I won't watch you destroy yourself trying to meet an impossible standard. Then don't watch. She managed a smile. Close your eyes and believe. The ceremony continued around them, but Liora barely heard it. 3 days. She had 3 days to do what she hadn't managed in 23 years. 3 days to become something she'd been told her entire life she could never be. 3 days to transform or lose everything. She spent the next 2 days in controlled desperation. Cassandra brought her every text on Lycan transformations. Kira pushed her body to its absolute limit, trying to trigger the shift through exhaustion. Darius stayed close, offering support, but unable to hide his fear. Nothing worked. Liora meditated in the old temple. She swam in the frozen lake. She fasted. She gorged. She slept under the stars and ran until her lungs burned. No shift. No wolf. Not even a flicker. By the evening of the second day, she was sitting alone in the tower, staring at her hands, when Brenna entered. You should eat, the healer said, setting down a tray. I'm not hungry. You're wasting away. At this rate, you'll collapse before the challenge even begins. Liora looked up. What if I can't do it? What if there's nothing inside me to shift? Brenna sat down heavily. Then you'll fail, and King Blackthorn will either reject you or lose his throne. And the territories will fracture into civil war because half of them love him and half of them think Varen's right. She paused. No pressure. That's not helpful. Wasn't trying to be. Brenna studied her. You saved 15 warriors during the rogue attack. You worked until your hands bled and you could barely stand. You didn't stop even when that boy died on your table. I still lost him. But you tried. That's more than most queens would do. Brenna leaned forward. Maybe that's your answer. What do you mean? Everyone's trying to make you into something you're not. A fighter, a shapeshifter, a traditional queen. She shrugged. Maybe you need to stop trying to be what they expect and start being what you are. What am I? I don't know. But I know you're not nothing. Brenna stood. Eat, rest, and stop trying to force it. Sometimes the only way forward is to surrender. She left. Liora stared at the food, Brenna's words echoing in her mind. Stop trying to force it. Surrender. What did that even mean? The blood moon rose red and full on the third night. The entire conclave gathered in the great courtyard, 8,000 wolves forming a massive circle. Torches burned at intervals, casting dancing shadows across the stone. In the center of the circle stood a raised platform. That's where Liora would either transform or fail. Darius stood beside her as they made their way through the crowd. Warriors parted silently, their faces grim. You don't have to do this, Darius said for the 100th time. We can leave. Right now. I'll give up the crown. We'll go somewhere they can't find us. And spend our lives running? Liora shook her head. No, I won't let Varen win. I won't let him prove that strength is the only thing that matters. Then what will you prove? She didn't have an answer. They reached the platform. Varen was already there, surrounded by his warriors. His smile was predatory. Ready to humiliate yourself, little queen? Liora ignored him and climbed onto the platform. The master of ceremonies raised his arms, and the crowd fell silent. The challenge is witnessed, he announced. Liora Vance, mate to King Darius Blackthorn, must shift before this assembly. Prove her Lycan blood. Prove her right to the throne. He paused. You have until the moon reaches its zenith. Begin. All eyes turned to Liora. She stood alone on the platform, feeling the weight of 8,000 judgments pressing down on her. She closed her eyes. Come on, she thought desperately. Please. If you're in there, if you've been waiting, now is the time. I need you. We need you. Nothing. She tried to remember everything she'd been taught. Feel the animal inside. Let instinct take over. Embrace the beast. But there was no beast. There was only her. Tired, scared, human. The crowd began to murmur. She's got nothing, someone said. Waste of time. The king should just reject her now and save everyone the embarrassment. Liora opened her eyes and looked at Darius. He stood at the edge of the platform, his face anguished, his hands clenched into fists. She saw Cassandra beside him, her expression unreadable. Kira, watching with something that looked like pity. Brenna, standing with the healers, shaking her head slowly. And Varen, his smile growing wider by the second. The moon climbed higher. Liora felt panic clawing at her throat. She tried again, reaching deep inside herself for something, anything, that might respond. Nothing. 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 She was going to fail. Right here, in front of everyone, she was going to prove that every cruel thing ever said about her was true. She was wolfless, broken, less. The moon reached its zenith. Time, the master of ceremonies said. The crowd erupted. Some booed, some laughed, some just looked away, unable to watch. Varen stepped forward. Well, that was pathetic. King Blackthorn, the law is clear. Reject her now, or forfeit your No. The word came from Liora. Varen paused. Excuse me? No. Leora's voice grew stronger. I won't shift. I can't. You're right about that. I have no wolf. She looked around at the thousands of faces watching her. I'm exactly what you all think I am. Human, weak, broken. Then you admit defeat, Varen said smugly. I admit the truth. Liora turned to face him directly. I can't shift, but I'm still Lycan. The crowd went silent. How do you figure that? Varen demanded. Because Lycan isn't just about shifting, it's about surviving. Her voice carried across the courtyard. Every one of you looks at me and sees weakness. But I survived years in a pack that wanted me dead. I survived being collared, rejected, and treated like I was worth less than dirt. And I'm still standing. She turned to address the crowd. You want to know what makes someone Lycan? It's not just teeth and claws, it's endurance. It's refusing to break when everything says you should. It's finding strength in places no one thought to look. Her hands were shaking, but she kept going. I've spent my whole life being told I'm not enough, not strong enough, not wolf enough, not worthy enough. And maybe you're all right. Maybe I'm not what a queen should be, she paused. But I'm what this king chose, and that has to count for something. She looked at Darius. You asked me what I would prove. I guess this is it. I prove that worth isn't just measured in bloodlines and transformations. It's measured in what you do when everyone expects you to give up. The courtyard was silent. Then someone in the crowd, a young warrior Liora had helped heal during the rogue attack, stepped forward. I stand with the queen, he said, placing his fist over his heart. Another warrior joined him, then another. She saved my life, one of them said. When I was bleeding out and everyone else was too busy fighting, she didn't leave me. She's got more courage in her human body than half the warriors here, another added. One by one, dozens of wolves stepped forward, then hundreds. Varen's face went purple. This is absurd. The law states, the law, a new voice interrupted, says a queen must be able to defend her territory and lead beside her king. Everyone turned. Cassandra stood at the edge of the platform, her expression fierce. My son's mate has defended this territory. She's healed our warriors, stood with them in battle, and refused to break even when every tradition demanded she should. The Queen Mother's voice rang with authority. If that's not strength, then we've forgotten what strength means. She still can't shift, Varen roared. So, Cassandra shot back, some of our greatest queens never shifted either. History is full of them, if you bother to read instead of posturing. That's not, you're twisting. I'm stating facts. Cassandra climbed onto the platform beside Liora. This girl has more steel in her spine than you'll ever have, Varen. And if you think you can bully my son into rejecting his true mate, you're even stupider than you look. The crowd roared approval. Varen looked around wildly, seeing his support crumbling. This isn't over. Yes, Darius said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. It is. He shifted, that massive, impossible transformation, and leaped onto the platform in one fluid motion. Even in Lycan form, he moved with grace that belied his size. He shifted back, standing beside Liora and Cassandra, and addressed the conclave. My mate stays. Anyone who challenges that challenges me. Directly, right now. Silence. No one moved. Darius's golden eyes swept the crowd. That's what I thought. This conclave is over. Go home, all of you. Slowly, the crowd began to disperse. Some looked disappointed, some looked relieved, but they all left. Varen stood alone on the platform, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. Finally, he spat at Leora's feet and stalked away, his warriors following. Leora's legs gave out. Darius caught her, holding her steady. You did it, he whispered. You really did it. I didn't shift. No, you did something better. He pulled back to look at her. You changed their minds. Cassandra laid a hand on Leora's shoulder. Not all of them. Varen's going to be a problem, and there will be others who agree with him. Let them come, Liora said, finding her voice. I'm done trying to be what everyone expects. If they can't accept me as I am, that's their problem. Cassandra smiled. There's the queen I was waiting to meet. She left them alone on the platform, under the blood moon surrounded by emptying shadows. Darius cupped Leora's face. I meant what I said. I would have burned it all down for you. I know, she leaned into his touch. But we found a better way. Did we? Varen's still out there. His pride is wounded. Men like him don't forgive that. Then we'll deal with him when he comes back. Liora straightened, feeling something shift inside her, Not a wolf, but something just as important. Together. Darius kissed her forehead. Together. They stood there for a long moment, just breathing, and then Liora felt it. A presence. Not inside her. Outside. She turned sharply, scanning the empty courtyard. "What is it?" Darius asked, immediately alert. "I don't know. Something's—" She trailed off, her eyes catching movement in the shadows beyond the torchlight. A figure stood at the edge of the courtyard, cloaked, hooded, watching. "Who's there?" Darius called out, his hand moving to his blade. The figure didn't respond, didn't move. Then it turned and disappeared into the darkness. Liora's heart hammered. "Did you see?" "I saw." Darius's expression was grim. "Stay close to me. Something's wrong." They hurried toward the keep, but the feeling of being watched followed them. And when they reached their quarters, they found a message carved into their door. 3 words gouged deep into the wood. "The wolf wakes." Liora stared at the message, ice flooding her veins. "What does that mean?" she whispered. But Darius's face had gone white. "I don't know, but whatever's coming, it's going to be worse than Varen. Much worse." The wind howled outside, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf's howl answered. Not celebration. Warning. The howl echoed through the mountains again, closer this time, and Liora felt something respond deep in her chest. Not her wolf, but something older, darker, like a door she'd never known existed suddenly rattling on its hinges. Darius stepped in front of her, his body coiled tight. "Get inside, now!" "What is that?" "I don't know. But whatever left that message," he gestured to the carved words still gleaming wetly in the torchlight, "wants us scared. Don't give them the satisfaction." They moved into their quarters, and Darius immediately barred the door, checked the windows, and stationed 2 guards outside. But even with all the precautions, Liora couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was coming had already found them. She traced her fingers over the message one more time before Darius pulled her away from the door. "The wolf wakes." "What wolf?" "There are stories," Darius said slowly, moving to pour them both water with hands that weren't quite steady. "Old stories. About wolves that went feral. Not rogues, but something worse. Wolves who rejected the pack laws entirely and became something between human and beast. Forever trapped in the shift, forever hunting. You think one of those is here?" "I think someone wants us to think that." He handed her a cup. "Which means this is psychological warfare. Varen, probably. Trying to undermine the victory you won tonight." But his voice lacked conviction. Liora drank, the cold water doing nothing to settle her nerves. "We should tell Cassandra and Kira. If there's a real threat..." A scream cut through the night. Then another. Then chaos. Darius was out the door before Liora could blink, his body already shifting mid-stride. She grabbed the blade he'd given her weeks ago and followed, her heart hammering. The courtyard was pandemonium. Wolves ran in every direction, some shifting, some shouting orders, some simply frozen in terror. Fires had broken out in 3 different locations, and in the center of it all, Liora's breath caught. It wasn't a wolf. It wasn't human either. The creature was massive, easily 12 feet tall, with limbs too long and joints that bent the wrong way. Its fur was matted and black, patched with exposed skin that looked burned. Its eyes glowed sickly yellow, and when it opened its mouth, the sound that came out was nothing natural. Half howl, half shriek, all wrong. A feral. A real one. It had 3 wolves cornered against a wall, their escape routes blocked by flame. As Liora watched, frozen, the creature lunged. Darius hit it like a battering ram, his Lycan form crashing into the feral with enough force to send them both tumbling. They rolled through fire and stone, a blur of teeth and claws and rage. Liora ran toward the trapped wolves. "Move, this way!" They scrambled toward her, one of them limping badly. Liora threw her arm around the injured wolf, a young woman barely older than herself, and hauled her away from the flames. "Can you shift back?" Liora demanded. The woman did, gasping as she clutched her bleeding side. "It came out of nowhere. Just appeared in the middle of the courtyard and started killing..." "How many dead?" "I don't know. 5? 6? Maybe more." Liora's stomach turned, but she forced herself to focus. "Can you walk?" "I think so." The feral shrieked again, the sound so piercing that every wolf in the courtyard flinched. Darius had it pinned, his jaws locked around its throat, but the creature was impossibly strong. It bucked and twisted, its two long limbs finding purchase, and threw Darius off. Kira appeared from the shadows, already shifted, and leaped onto the feral's back. Her claws dug deep, but the creature barely seemed to notice. It spun and caught her with one massive paw, sending her crashing into a stone wall. More warriors converged, but the feral moved like something possessed, impossibly fast despite its size. It killed 2 more wolves in seconds, its claws opening them from throat to belly with surgical precision. Liora watched in horror as Darius rallied the warriors, trying to coordinate an attack. But every time they got close, the feral adapted, moved differently, found new angles. It was learning. It's toying with them, Liora realized with sick certainty. This isn't just hunting, it's playing. Brenna appeared at her elbow, dragging a cart of medical supplies. Get the wounded to the healing ward, now. I need every spare hand. But you can't fight that thing, girl, so make yourself useful another way. Liora wanted to argue, wanted to stay near Darius, but Brenna was right. She gathered the injured wolves. There were more than she'd thought, at least a dozen, and began herding them toward the healing ward. Halfway there, she heard footsteps behind her. She spun, blade up, and found herself face to face with Alpha Varen. He wasn't alone. A dozen of his warriors flanked him, all armed, all wearing expressions that made Leora's blood run cold. Well, well, Varen said, smiling. Look at this, the little queen, all alone in the chaos. Liora kept her blade steady between them. Move aside, Varen, we have wounded. I'm sure you do. Terrible thing, ferals. So unpredictable. His smile widened. Funny how this one showed up right after your little speech tonight, almost like someone summoned it. Ice flooded Leora's veins. You didn't. Didn't what? Didn't point out that you're a liability? That your presence here has brought nothing but chaos? He took a step closer. The stronghold was safe before you arrived. Now look at it, burning, dying, all because Darius couldn't see past his obsession with a wolfless nobody. You released a feral into the stronghold, Liora said, her voice shaking with rage. You killed your own kind just to make a point. I did what was necessary to show everyone the truth. You're a weakness, a crack in the foundation, and cracks spread. He gestured to his warriors. Take her. They moved forward. Liora didn't think. She lunged at the closest warrior, her blade flashing. He was bigger, stronger, better trained, but she was desperate. Her blade found the gap between his armor plates and sank deep into his shoulder. He howled and stumbled back. She spun to face the next one, and something inside her snapped. Not broke, snapped open, like a lock finally giving way after years of pressure. Heat exploded through her body, so intense she thought she was burning alive. Her bones cracked, not breaking, but reshaping. Her skin split and healed in the same instant. Her senses sharpened until she could hear every heartbeat, smell every drop of blood, taste the fear in the air. And then she wasn't human anymore. The transformation was agony and ecstasy and violence all at once. When it was over, and it only took seconds, though it felt like hours, Liora stood on 4 legs. Her vision shifted to something sharper, more primal. She was smaller than most wolves, leaner, built for speed rather than power. Her fur was silver white, almost luminescent in the firelight. And when she opened her mouth, the growl that came out made every one of Varen's warriors take a step back. Varen stared at her, his face going white. Impossible. You couldn't. The challenge. You had no... Liora didn't let him finish. She moved like lightning, closing the distance between them in a heartbeat. She didn't attack. Not yet. She just stood there between Varen and the wounded wolves, her teeth bared, her message clear. Touch them and die. Varen's warriors looked at each other uncertainly. One of them shifted, preparing to fight, but Varen held up a hand. Stand down, he said, his voice tight. But Alpha Keek... I said stand down. Varen's eyes never left Liora. This changes nothing. You think shifting makes you legitimate? You're still just... Liora snarled, and this time Varen actually flinched. Behind him, the courtyard had gone quiet. The feral was down. Darius and a dozen warriors had finally managed to bring it to its knees. But now every wolf in the stronghold was staring at Liora. At the queen who had finally found her wolf, Darius shifted back, his body covered in blood and ash. He crossed the courtyard slowly, and when he saw Liora, saw what she'd become, his expression cracked into something between relief and awe. "Liora," he breathed. She shifted back without thinking, the transformation somehow easier in reverse. One moment she was wolf, the next she was human again, standing naked and shaking in the firelight. Someone, Kira, she thought, threw a cloak over her shoulders. Darius pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "You did it. You actually did it." How did I? Liora couldn't form coherent thoughts. Everything was too sharp, too loud, too much. "Later," Darius murmured. "Right now, we have a traitor to deal with." He released her and turned to face Varen, his expression going cold. "You released a feral into my stronghold," Darius said quietly. "Killed innocent wolves, threatened my mate. Give me one reason I shouldn't execute you right here." Varen straightened, trying to recover his composure. "You have no proof." "We have your scent all over the message carved into our door," Kira interrupted, limping forward. "She was bloodied, but alive. And 3 witnesses who saw you near the eastern wall right before the feral appeared. You're not as clever as you think, Varen." The courtyard erupted in angry murmurs. Varen looked around, seeing his support evaporate. "You can't prove intent. Maybe I was just investigating. The feral's collar." Cassandra's voice cut through the noise. She emerged from the crowd holding a twisted piece of metal. "Still has your territory's mark on it. Iron Ridge wolves use copper clasps. Very distinctive." Varen's face went purple. "That could have been planted." "By who? Me?" Cassandra laughed coldly. "You tried to murder my family, Varen. You endangered every wolf in this stronghold. And for what? Wounded pride?" "She's not fit to be queen," Varen shouted, pointing at Liora. "She was wolfless, weak. She just shifted," Darius said softly, "right in front of everyone. Proved everything you said was a lie. So now, what's your excuse?" Silence. Varen looked around desperately, but no one met his eyes. Even his own warriors had stepped away from him. "The law is clear," Cassandra said. "Endangering the conclave is a capital offense. King Blackthorn, what's your judgment?" Darius looked at Liora. "What do you think?" Every eye turned to her. Liora stood there, wrapped in a borrowed cloak, her body still trembling from the shift, and looked at Varen. This man who had tried to destroy her, who had killed innocent wolves just to prove a point, who represented everything cruel about the pack hierarchy. She could call for his death. Everyone would support it, but that would make her just like him. "Exile," she said finally. "Strip him of his territory. Send him into the wild alone. Let him survive on his own strength, since he values it so much." Varen's face went ashen. "You can't. That's worse than death. Then you should have thought of that before you released a feral in our home." Liora's voice was steady now, stronger. "You wanted to prove I was weak. Instead, you proved you're exactly what you accused me of being, a danger to this pack. So live with that, alone, forever." Darius smiled grimly. "Exile it is, effective immediately. Varen, you have until dawn to leave Blackthorn territory. If you're found here after sunrise, the sentence changes to execution. Understood?" Varen opened his mouth, closed it, then turned and stalked away, his former warriors melting into the crowd rather than follow him. As soon as he was gone, the courtyard erupted in cheers. Warriors pressed forward, trying to get closer to Liora, calling out congratulations and praise. Someone started a chant, her name over and over, until it echoed off the stone walls. Liora stood at the center of it all, overwhelmed, barely able to process what had just happened. She'd shifted. After 23 years, after countless failed attempts, after giving up hope entirely, she'd finally found her wolf. And she'd found her on her own terms, in her own time, when it mattered most. Darius pulled her close again, his lips against her ear. "How do you feel?" "Exhausted, terrified, amazing." She laughed shakily. "Is this what it's always like?" "The shift? It gets easier. The politics?" He kissed her temple. "That never gets easier, but you handled it perfectly." Kira pushed through the crowd, grinning despite her injuries. "Not bad, Queen. Not bad at all." "I couldn't have done it without you," Liora said. "All those training sessions, weren't about making you fight like a wolf. They were about making you strong enough to survive the shift when it finally came. Kira's expression turned serious. Most Lycans die during their first transformation. The body can't handle it, but you were ready. All that training made you ready. Cassandra appeared, looking uncharacteristically pleased. Well, I suppose I owe you an apology. For what? For doubting you'd survive this long. The Queen Mother smiled slightly. You've proven me wrong at every turn. That's refreshing. Brenna shouldered her way through. All right, that's enough. The Queen needs rest, and I've got 17 wounded wolves who need attention. Everyone back to work. The crowd dispersed slowly, though many wolves stopped to touch Liora's shoulder or nod respectfully as they passed. When the courtyard finally cleared, Liora sagged against Darius, her legs barely holding her up. Come on, he said gently. Let's get you cleaned up and fed. You've earned it. They made their way back to their quarters, stepping over debris and bloodstains. The stronghold was wrecked, fires still smoldering, walls cracked, bodies being carried to the temple for preparation. But they'd survived. Inside their rooms, Darius helped Liora into a bath while servants brought food and clean clothes. She sat in the hot water, watching steam rise, and tried to process everything. I can still feel it, she said quietly. My wolf. She's right there, just under my skin, waiting. That's normal. Darius sat on the edge of the tub. The first shift is the hardest. After that, it's like breathing. You'll learn to control it, to shift at will. What if I can't? What if it was just adrenaline, just that one time? It wasn't. He took her hand. You're Lycan, Liora. You always were. Your wolf was just waiting for you to be strong enough to handle her. Liora looked down at their joined hands. Varen was right about one thing. I brought chaos here, the rogue attack, the challenge, the feral would have happened anyway. Varen was looking for an excuse to move against us. If it hadn't been you, he'd have found something else. Darius squeezed her hand. You didn't cause this. You survived it. There's a difference. She wanted to believe him. After the bath, she ate mechanically. Bread, meat, fruit, barely tasting any of it. Her body needed fuel, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying the shift over and over. The pain, the power, the feeling of finally being complete. She fell asleep in Darius's arms, too exhausted to even dream. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows and someone was pounding on the door. Darius was already up, pulling on clothes. What is it? Kira's voice came through the door. You need to see this, both of you. They dressed quickly and followed Kira to the eastern wall. A crowd had already gathered, all staring at something beyond the gates. Liora pushed through until she could see. In the snow outside the stronghold, someone had left another message. Not carved this time. Written in what looked like ash and blood. 10 words that made Liora's blood run cold. The wolfless queen has awakened. Now the real hunt begins. Below it, driven into the frozen ground like a grave marker, was a wooden stake. And impaled on that stake was Alpha Varen's head. His eyes were still open, frozen in an expression of absolute terror. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers. Who did this? Someone demanded. Varen was exiled, not executed. Something killed him between here and the border. What kind of something leaves a message? Darius's face had gone pale. Everyone back inside. Now. Full lockdown. No one leaves the stronghold until we know what we're dealing with. As the crowd dispersed, Liora stood frozen, staring at the message. The real hunt begins. This isn't over, she whispered. Darius put his arm around her shoulders. No, it's not. Whatever's out there, whatever killed Varen and left that message, it's not done with us yet. Do you think it's another feral? I don't know. But ferals don't leave messages. They don't hunt strategically. He pulled her closer. Whatever this is, it's intelligent, and it knows exactly who you are. Liora looked up at him. What do we do? We prepare. We train. And when it comes, his eyes blazed gold. We're ready. Cassandra appeared beside them, her expression grim. The other territories are leaving. They say the stronghold isn't safe anymore. That whatever darkness you brought with you, she looked at Liora, is spreading. Let them leave, Liora said, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. Anyone who runs at the first sign of real danger isn't worth keeping. Cassandra smiled slightly. There's the queen I've been waiting for. They stood on the wall together, watching the snow fall over Varen's head, over the message written in blood. And somewhere in the mountains beyond, something howled. Different from the feral. Deeper. Older. Answering. Liora felt her wolf stir inside her, no longer sleeping, no longer waiting. Ready, the wolf seemed to say, finally ready. Good, Liora whispered back, because I'm done running. She turned to Darius. Whatever's coming for us, we face it together. No more hiding, no more trying to be what everyone expects. We fight on our terms. Darius pulled her into a fierce kiss. When they broke apart, he was smiling. On our terms. Kira stepped forward, placing her fist over her heart. I'm with you. Brenna followed suit, then more warriors, then dozens. By the time the sun reached its zenith, nearly half the stronghold's wolves had pledged themselves to Liora's service. Not because she was Darius's mate, because she was their queen. And queens didn't bow. They stood and fought, no matter what came hunting in the dark. The hunt came 3 days later, just before dawn, when the stronghold was at its most vulnerable. Liora woke to silence, not the peaceful kind, but the hollow, waiting silence that comes right before violence. She was already reaching for her blade when Darius sat up beside her, his body coiled tight. Something's wrong, he said. I feel it too. They dressed in seconds, not bothering with ceremonial armor. This wasn't about appearances. This was survival. The corridors were empty as they made their way to the main hall. Too empty. Where were the night guards, the patrols? They found the first body at the base of the tower stairs. A young warrior, his throat torn out so cleanly he'd probably died before he could scream. His eyes were still open, staring at nothing. Darius knelt beside him, touching 2 fingers to the dead wolf's forehead in a silent prayer of passing. When he stood, his expression was carved from stone. This wasn't a feral. Ferals are messy, chaotic. This is precise. Professional. Then what? A howl split the pre-dawn darkness. Then another. Then a dozen more, rising in a chorus that made Liora's newly awakened wolf pace restlessly inside her chest. They ran toward the sound, bursting out into the main courtyard, and stopped. Warriors lined the walls, weapons drawn but frozen in place. In the center of the courtyard stood a circle of figures, wolves, but wrong somehow, their forms flickering between human and beast like shadows dancing in firelight. They wore no armor, carried no weapons. They didn't need them. And in the center of that circle stood a woman. She was tall, angular, with hair the color of old blood and eyes that burned silver instead of gold. Scars covered her exposed arms, each one deliberate, ceremonial. She wore leather the color of smoke, and when she smiled at Liora, it was like looking into a mirror made of nightmares. "Hello, sister," the woman said. Liora's blood turned to ice. "I don't know you." "No, but I know you. I've been watching you for months, ever since the Lycan King claimed the last surviving Vance." The woman's smile widened. "Did you really think you were the only one?" Darius moved to stand between them. "Who are you?" "My name is Seraphine Vance, and I'm here to collect what's mine." The name hit Liora like a physical blow. Vance. Her family name. But her parents had died when she was 5, and she'd been told she had no siblings, no living relatives. "You're lying," Liora said, but her voice shook. "Am I?" Seraphine gestured, and one of her wolves threw something at Liora's feet. A leather-bound book, old and water-stained. Liora picked it up with trembling hands and opened it. Birth records, her parents' names, her own birth documented carefully. And below it, another entry. Seraphine Vance, born 2 years prior. Status, feral. Removed from pack records. Exiled at age 7. "You were culled," Liora whispered, reading the cramped handwriting. "They said you were dangerous, unstable. They sent you into the wild to die." "They tried." Seraphine's voice was cold. "But I survived. I learned to embrace what they called madness. I gathered others like me. Wolves the packs threw away, deemed too broken, too violent, too wrong to deserve life. We became our own pack, stronger than any territory, free from their laws. She took a step forward, and every warrior on the walls tensed. And then I heard about you, the wolfless sister who somehow survived, who caught a king's attention, who stood before the entire conclave and refused to break. Seraphine's expression shifted into something almost admiring. You have no idea how powerful you are, do you? I'm not powerful. I just shifted 3 days ago. Exactly. Seraphine's eyes blazed. You held a Lycan transformation inside your body for over 20 years without dying. Do you understand how impossible that is? The pressure of that much power, dormant, should have killed you before you reached adolescence. But it didn't. You contained it, controlled it without even knowing it was there. Darius's hand found Liora's. What do you want, Seraphine? I want what every exile wants. Recognition, justice, and revenge. She looked at Liora. Join me, sister. Together we could tear down every pact that ever called us broken. We could build something better, something where strength isn't measured by how well you follow rules, but by how fiercely you survive. By killing innocent wolves? Liora gestured to the bodies scattered around the courtyard. By leaving messages in blood? That's not survival, that's terrorism. It's revolution. Seraphine's voice sharpened. They threw me away like garbage, told me I was too damaged to deserve life. I'm just showing them what damage looks like when it refuses to die quietly. So this is about revenge. This is about truth. Seraphine spread her arms. Every wolf standing with me was éclated, rejected, or abandoned by the packs. We're the ones deemed too weak, too strange, too inconvenient. We're proof that their system is broken. And I'm offering you a choice. Stand with the system that tried to destroy you, or stand with the wolves who understand what you've survived. Liora looked at the figures surrounding Seraphine. Now that she looked closer, she could see the truth in their eyes. Pain, rage, and the hollow ache of rejection. These weren't monsters. They were wounded animals who'd learned to bite back. I understand what you're offering, Liora said carefully. And I understand why. But killing innocent wolves won't fix what's broken. It just proves them right. Then what's your solution? Seraphine challenged. Stand here and hope they'll change? Hope they'll suddenly decide the rules that kept you collared and bleeding were wrong? No. Liora released Darius's hand and took a step forward. I'm going to prove the rules need to change. Not through violence, but by becoming exactly what they said was impossible. A queen who protects the rejected instead of casting them out further. Seraphine stared at her. You really believe that will work? I have to try, because if I don't, if I just embrace violence and call it justice, then I'm no different than Rowan, than Varen, than every wolf who ever looked at someone weaker and decided they weren't worth protecting. Pretty words. Seraphine's expression hardened. But words don't survive winter. Power does. And if you won't join me willingly, she shifted, her body exploding into something between wolf and horror, larger than any Lycan Liora had seen. Then I'll take your power by force. A Vance wolf belongs with the Vance pack, not playing house with kings. Her exiles shifted in unison, a wave of transformation that made the air crack. Darius shifted immediately, positioning himself between Liora and the threat. Around the courtyard, the Blackthorn warriors shifted as well, preparing for battle. But Liora stood frozen, staring at her sister, this woman who shared her blood, her pain, her name, and felt her wolf howling inside her chest. Not in aggression, in recognition. She's pack, her wolf insisted. Broken, but ours. Wait, Liora said. Everyone paused. Liora looked at Seraphine, really looked at her, past the scars and the rage and the carefully constructed armor of violence. And she saw a 7-year-old girl, terrified and alone, cast into the wilderness by wolves who were supposed to protect her. You're right, Liora said quietly. The system is broken. It was broken when they exiled you. It was broken when they collared me. It's broken every time a wolf is deemed unworthy just for being different. She took another step forward. But destroying it just creates more pain, more exiles, more wolves who grow up believing they're monsters. So what do you suggest? Seraphine's voice dripped skepticism. Asking nicely for them to change? No, I suggest building something better, right here, right now. Liora looked around at the assembled wolves. Blackthorn warriors, Seraphine's exiles, all of them watching, waiting. What if we created a new law? One that says exile isn't the answer to difference. That wolves deemed too broken, too strange, too wrong by their original packs have a place here. Protection, training, a chance to prove they're more than their worst moments. The courtyard erupted in protests. You can't be serious. Those are ferals! Killers! They murdered our wolves! Enough! Darius's voice cut through the noise like thunder. He shifted back, standing beside Liora. She's right. The old laws have been failing us for generations. We exile the broken and wonder why they come back as monsters. Maybe it's time we stopped creating the very threats we claim to fight. Cassandra pushed through the crowd, her expression unreadable. You're proposing we take in exiles, the very wolves who just attacked us, who killed 17 of our people. I'm proposing we offer them a choice, Liora said. The same choice Darius offered me. A chance to be something other than what everyone expects, to prove they're more than their damage. She turned to Seraphine. Your wolves have survived impossible odds. They've endured pain that would break most of us. That takes incredible strength. Imagine what they could do with training, support, and a pack that actually values them. Seraphine's expression was unreadable. And in exchange, you stop killing, you submit to Blackthorn law, and you help me build something better than what cast both of us aside. Liora held out her hand. Please, sister, I don't want to fight you. I want to stand beside you. For a long moment, Seraphine didn't move. Then, slowly, one of her exiles, a scarred woman with white hair, stepped forward. I'm tired of running, she said quietly. Tired of killing. If there's really a chance for something different— There isn't, Seraphine snapped. They'll betray us the moment we're vulnerable. Then we make them swear oaths, the white-haired woman said. Blood oaths, binding. If they break them, we leave. But if they honor them— She looked at Liora with something desperate in her eyes. Maybe we finally get to stop being monsters. Other exiles murmured agreement. Not all of them, but enough. Seraphine looked at her wolves, seeing the hope dawning in their faces. The hope she'd spent years trying to kill because hope hurt worse than rage. You'll fail, she said to Liora. The moment real pressure comes, they'll revert. They'll cast us out again. Then I'll stop them. Liora's voice was steel. I'm not asking you to trust the system. I'm asking you to trust me, your sister, the girl who survived the same hell you did and came out the other side still believing there was a better way. Seraphine stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Then, with visible reluctance, she shifted back to human form. Her exiles followed, one by one, until the courtyard was filled with naked, shivering wolves who looked more terrified than threatening. One chance, Seraphine said. You get one chance to prove this isn't another beautiful lie. But the moment you betray us, I won't. Seraphine studied her sister's face, searching for deception, for weakness. She found neither. Finally, reluctantly, she took Liora's hand. The moment their skin touched, something flared. Not the mate bond Liora shared with Darius, but something equally powerful. Blood recognition, pack recognition, family. Cassandra's voice cut through the moment. This is insane. We don't have the resources to rehabilitate exiles. We don't have the facilities, the expertise. Then we'll build them, Liora said, not releasing Seraphine's hand. We'll create new structures, new laws, whatever it takes. And who pays for this? Who trains them? Who takes responsibility when one of them snaps and kills again? I do, Liora said simply. I take full responsibility. If this fails, if even one exile under my protection harms an innocent wolf, I'll submit to whatever judgment the conclave demands, including exile myself. The crowd gasped. Darius turned to her sharply. Liora, you can't— I can. She looked up at him. This is my purpose. Not just being your mate. Not just surviving, but making sure no wolf ever has to endure what Seraphine and I endured, what countless others have endured because the system failed them. You'll stake your entire position on this? Your safety? Your life? Yes. Darius stared at her, dozens of emotions warring across his face. Then slowly, he smiled. Then I stand with you, and anyone who challenges your decision challenges me. Kira stepped forward next. I'm with you, Queen. Someone has to keep these exiles in line. Might as well be me. Brenna followed. I've seen what exile does to wolves, the damage, the trauma. If you're serious about healing instead of punishing, you'll need healers who understand that. Count me in. One by one, wolves pledged themselves to Liora's vision. Not all of them. Some walked away, unwilling to risk their safety on what they saw as naive idealism. But enough stayed. Enough believed. Enough wanted to prove that change was possible. Within hours, the stronghold transformed from a battlefield into something else entirely. Exiles were given food, clothes, and temporary quarters in the guest wing. Healers examined wounds and administered medicine. Warriors established patrol rotations, not to guard against the exiles, but to protect them from wolves who might seek revenge. And through it all, Liora moved like a force of nature, organizing, delegating, refusing to stop even when exhaustion made her hands shake. Seraphine watched her sister work, her expression unreadable. Finally, she cornered Liora in a quiet hallway. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, Seraphine said. Probably both. Liora leaned against the wall, finally allowing herself a moment to breathe. Thank you for trusting me. I know it wasn't easy. It wasn't trust. It was desperation. Seraphine's voice was harsh, but her eyes were softer. My wolves were dying, slowly from the inside out. Living as monsters was killing them faster than any warrior could, so I took the gamble. Then let's make sure it pays off. Seraphine studied her sister's face, so similar to her own, yet so different. Where Seraphine had hardened into sharp edges, Liora had somehow remained soft without becoming weak. Why? Seraphine asked quietly. Why risk everything for wolves you don't even know? Because no one should have to survive alone. Because I know what it feels like to be called worthless and believe it. Because, Liora's voice cracked. Because if someone had done this for you 20 years ago, you wouldn't have had to become a monster to survive. Something in Seraphine's chest cracked open. She turned away quickly, blinking hard. Don't make me regret this. I won't. Seraphine left without another word, but Liora saw the way her sister's shoulders shook as she walked away. Progress. Painful, imperfect, but real. The next weeks were chaos, but the productive kind. Structures were built. Dormitories for the exiles, training facilities, healing centers. Laws were drafted, argued over, revised, and finally implemented. The Exile Integration Protocol, they called it, and it was unlike anything the Lycan territories had ever seen. Exiles would undergo evaluation, training, and gradual integration into pack life. They'd have mentors, healers, and advocates. They'd be given real chances to prove themselves, not just thrown into impossible situations and judged when they failed. Not every territory agreed. Some called it soft, dangerous, naive. But enough backed it. Enough recognized that the old way had created an endless cycle of violence that benefited no one. And at the center of it all stood Liora, no longer the wolfless girl who couldn't defend herself, but a queen who had discovered her strength lay not in teeth and claws, but in her refusal to abandon the wounded. 3 months after Seraphine's arrival, the first exile completed the integration program, the white-haired woman who had spoken up during the confrontation. Her name was Mira, and she'd been exiled at 16 for defending herself against an abusive alpha. The ceremony was simple. Mira stood before the assembled Blackthorn pack and swore oaths of loyalty. In return, she received a place, a purpose, and the kind of acceptance she'd thought was lost forever. When it was over, she approached Liora with tears streaming down her face. Thank you for seeing us as wolves instead of monsters. You were never monsters, Liora said gently. Just survivors who were never given a better option. More exiles followed. Not all succeeded. Some couldn't adjust, couldn't release the rage that had kept them alive in the wilderness. Those were offered resources and sent peacefully on their way, with warnings that violence would not be tolerated, but neither would they be hunted unless they became genuine threats. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. 6 months after the confrontation, Liora stood on the stronghold walls at sunset, watching training exercises below. Exiles and Blackthorn warriors working together, learning from each other, building something new. Darius joined her, sliding his arm around her waist. You did it. We did it. No. He kissed her temple. This was you, your vision, your courage. I just followed your lead. Liora leaned into him, watching the wolves below. It's still so fragile. One major incident, one exile who snaps, then we'll handle it. Together, like we handle everything. He turned her to face him. You've changed the entire North, Liora. The other territories are watching. Some are already implementing similar programs. You started a revolution without spilling blood. Yet, Liora said quietly, there will always be wolves who resist change. Then we'll face them. Like we faced Varen. Like we faced Seraphine. He cupped her face in his hands. You're not alone anymore. You have a pack that would follow you into fire. A sister who would die before betraying you. And a mate who loves you more than kingdoms or crowns or anything else in this world. Liora's eyes burned. I love you too, even when you're being absurdly dramatic. He laughed and pulled her into a kiss that tasted like smoke and snowmelt and forever. When they broke apart, Cassandra had appeared beside them. She cleared her throat pointedly. Yes, Mother, Darius said, not looking away from Liora. The council wants to know when you're planning to formalize the succession. Liora blinked. Succession? You're queen now, properly acknowledged by the conclave, which means you need heirs. Cassandra's expression was carefully neutral. Traditional timeline is within the first year of rule. Liora felt her face heat. We haven't really, we've been busy. I'm not asking for details. Cassandra's lips twitched. I'm just telling you what the council expects. Handle it however you see fit, but handle it. She left, her robe swirling dramatically. Darius was grinning. That's my mother, all business. She wants us to have children. She wants the succession secure. Children are just the traditional method. He sobered slightly. But only if you want them. There's no rush, no pressure. We have time. Liora looked back at the training yard, at the wolves building something better. I think I do. Want them, Eventually. When things are more stable. Then we'll wait until you're ready. He squeezed her hand. Everything in its time. 1 year after her arrival at the Blackthorn stronghold, Liora stood before the full conclave once more. But this time, she wasn't defending her right to exist. She was presenting the results of the Exile Integration Protocol. Dozens of successfully integrated wolves, crime rates down across all participating territories. And perhaps most importantly, hope spreading through the populations that had been deemed unworthy. The speech she gave was simple, direct, and came from a place of absolute conviction. A year ago, I stood here and told you I couldn't shift, that I was everything you'd been taught to reject. And some of you wanted to cast me out, prove I was a mistake, a weakness. She looked around the hall, meeting eyes without flinching. But I wasn't the weakness. The system that required me to be perfect before I was allowed to exist, that was the weakness. She gestured to where Seraphine and the integrated exiles stood. These wolves were told the same thing, that they were too broken, too dangerous, too wrong. And for years they believed it. They became what you called them because that was the only role they were allowed to play. But given an alternative, given support, training, and the radical notion that they deserved a chance, they became protectors, healers, teachers, productive members of our society instead of threats we had to hunt. She paused, letting the words sink in. I'm not saying the old laws were all wrong. I'm saying they're incomplete. Strength matters, survival matters, but so does compassion. So does recognizing that sometimes the wolves we cast aside are the ones who could have made us strongest, if only we'd given them the chance to grow. The Exile Integration Protocol isn't just about being kind. It's about being smart. Every wolf we save from exile is one less enemy we have to fight. Every broken wolf we help heal becomes an ally instead of a threat. It's strategy as much as morality. She looked directly at the kings and queens who had opposed her most vocally. I know some of you still think this is naive, dangerous, a mistake that will cost us dearly, and maybe you're right. Maybe this experiment will fail, but I'd rather fail trying to build something better than succeed at maintaining something broken. The hall was silent. Then slowly, one king stood, the Winterborn Alpha, one of the oldest and most traditional leaders in the North. Queen Blackthorn, he said formally, your program has shown measurable results in my territory. Crime is down, integration is up. And 3 exiles you personally vouched for saved my grandson's life during a rogue attack last month. He inclined his head. I was wrong to doubt you, and I pledge Winterborn's continued support for the protocol. Other leaders stood, one by one, offering support, resources, and recognition. Not all of them. Some territories remained hostile, convinced that softness would be their downfall. But enough stood that the tide had clearly turned. When the conclave ended, Liora was mobbed by well-wishers, petitioners, and wolves seeking advice. She handled each with grace, patience, and the quiet authority she'd earned through survival. Hours later, alone with Darius in their quarters, she finally allowed herself to collapse. I can't believe that worked, she said, her face pressed against his chest. I can. He stroked her hair gently. You have a gift, Liora, for seeing potential where others see only damage, for believing in second chances even when it costs you. It almost cost me everything. But it didn't. You won. Against all odds, against all tradition, you won. He tilted her face up to his. You're not the girl who came here a year ago. You're not even the queen who survived the Blood Moon Challenge. You're something more now, a symbol, proof that change is possible. Liora closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her. A year ago, she'd been scrubbing floors in a pack that saw her as furniture. Now she was reshaping the entire Northern Territories, one integrated exile at a time. What happens now? She asked. Now, Darius smiled. Now we keep building, keep proving that your way works. And eventually, he kissed her softly. We start that family Cassandra keeps hinting about. If you're ready. Not quite yet, Liora smiled back. But soon, when I'm sure the protocol can survive without me hovering over every detail. Fair enough. He pulled her closer. We have time. 2 years after the Blood Moon Challenge, Liora stood in the temple gardens watching spring thaw the frozen ground. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling the movements of the life growing inside her. A daughter, the healer said, strong and healthy. Seraphine approached, her expression softer than it had been in the early days. She'd become Leora's most trusted advisor, her fierce protection of the exiles making her invaluable to the protocol's continued success. You should be resting, Seraphine said, though there was no real heat in it. I'm pregnant, not broken. Liora smiled. Besides, sitting still makes me crazy. You're always crazy. That's why this whole thing works. Seraphine sat down on the stone bench beside her. I have news. The Southern Territories want to implement the protocol. All of them. Unanimous vote. Leora's eyes went wide. Really? Really? Your daughter will be born into a world where exile isn't an automatic death sentence, where wolves like us have options. Seraphine's voice went quiet. You did that. You changed everything. Liora felt tears prick her eyes. We did that. I couldn't have done any of it without you. True. Seraphine grinned slightly. But you're the one who believed it was possible in the first place. I just followed your lead. They sat in comfortable silence, watching new growth push through old soil. Thank you, Liora said eventually, for trusting me, for giving this a chance. Thank you for seeing me as something other than a monster. Seraphine's hand found Leora's. For being the sister I thought I'd lost. You never lost me. I was just waiting to be found. The sun rose higher, warming the gardens, melting the last of winter's grip. Around them, the stronghold hummed with life. Integrated exiles training alongside warriors, children playing without fear, a community building something unprecedented. 5 years after arriving at the Blackthorn stronghold, Liora addressed the conclave one final time. Her daughter, Arya, sat on Darius's lap in the front row, watching with the serious expression of a 3-year-old who knew this was important but wasn't quite sure why. Beside them, Cassandra beamed with pride. Kira stood at attention with the warriors. Brenna represented the healers. And Seraphine stood with the integrated exiles, now numbering in the hundreds across all territories. 5 years ago, Liora began, I stood before you as a wolfless girl who had no business surviving, let alone leading. I was everything you'd been taught to reject. Weak, broken, wrong. She paused, looking around the hall. But I wasn't those things. I was just different. And difference, I've learned, isn't weakness. It's potential. It's the seed of change. It's what pushes us to evolve beyond what we thought possible. The Exile Integration Protocol has proven that. Hundreds of wolves who were deemed too damaged to save are now productive members of our society. They're warriors, healers, teachers, parents. They're proof that second chances aren't naive idealism. They're practical investment in our collective future. But this isn't the end. It's the beginning, because for every exile we've integrated, there are dozens more in the wilderness, believing they're monsters because that's what we told them. And that needs to change. She gestured to a document on the table before her. I'm proposing the Redemption Accords, a comprehensive reform of our justice system, not just for exiles, but for all wolves. A system that prioritizes rehabilitation over punishment, that recognizes trauma as something to heal instead of evidence of unworthiness, that gives every wolf the chance to become their best self instead of their worst. The hall erupted in discussion. Liora waited for it to quiet. I know this is radical. I know it challenges traditions that have stood for centuries. But traditions that hurt us aren't worth keeping. And a system that creates enemies it then has to destroy is fundamentally broken. She looked at Arya, who was watching her mother with wide, golden eyes. I want my daughter to grow up in a world where wolves aren't discarded for being imperfect, where strength means helping others survive, not crushing those who stumble, where queens aren't just warriors but healers, where power is measured not by how many you can kill, but by how many you can save. That's the world I'm fighting for. That's the world the Redemption Accords would create. And I'm asking you, all of you, to fight for it with me. She sat down. The hall was silent for a long moment. Then the Winterborn Alpha stood. I vote in favor. One by one, every territory leader stood and voiced their support. Not unanimous. There were still holdouts, still traditionalists who believed the old ways were safer, but overwhelming, undeniable. The Redemption Accords passed with a 73% majority. When the session ended, Liora was surrounded by wolves wanting to congratulate her, pledge support, or simply touch the queen who had reshaped their world. Eventually, Darius managed to extract her from the crowd. Arya balanced on his hip. Mama's famous, Arya announced seriously. Mama's exhausted, Liora corrected, taking her daughter and holding her close. But happy. You should be. Darius kissed them both. You just changed the entire North. Again, it's becoming a habit. Good habits are worth keeping. Liora smiled, breathing in her daughter's scent, milk and honey and perfect innocence. This is for her. For all of them. So they never have to survive what we survived. They won't. Darius wrapped his arms around them both. Because you made sure of it. 10 years after her arrival at the Blackthorn stronghold, Liora stood on the walls one final time. The territories spread out before her, no longer fractured, no longer at constant war with themselves. The Redemption Accords had taken root, changing not just laws but hearts. Crime was down. Integration was up. Exiles were no longer automatically hunted, but given chances to return, to heal, to become. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, still wolves who rejected change, still moments when the old ways tried to reassert themselves. But the tide had turned, permanently. Arya appeared beside her, now 13 and already showing signs of the powerful Lycan she would become. What are you thinking about? About how far we've come. Liora put her arm around her daughter. About the girl I used to be, scrubbing floors and believing I was worthless. You were never worthless. I know that now, but I had to learn it the hard way. Liora looked down at her daughter. That's why I fight so hard for the protocol. So other wolves don't have to learn it the way I did. Through pain and rejection and nearly losing everything. Arya leaned against her mother. I'm glad you didn't give up. On yourself or on us? I'm glad too. Liora kissed the top of her daughter's head. Now go. Your father's waiting to start training, and you know how impatient he gets. Arya laughed and ran off, her footsteps echoing on the stone. Liora watched her go, this daughter who would grow up knowing she was valued, who would never wear a collar, who would help build an even better world than the one Liora had created. You did it! Seraphine's voice came from behind her. Everything you said you would. You changed the world. Liora turned to face her sister. We did it. Together. Together, Seraphine agreed. Though I'm still waiting for it all to collapse. Old habits. It won't. Because we built it strong, built it on truth instead of tradition, on compassion instead of cruelty. Liora smiled. And because we're not done yet, there's always more work to do. Always. Seraphine moved to stand beside her, both of them looking out over the territories they'd reshaped. But for now, maybe we can just enjoy what we've accomplished, just for a moment. Just for a moment? Liora agreed. They stood together in comfortable silence, two sisters who had survived impossible odds and used that survival to make sure others wouldn't have to. The sun set over the mountains, painting the snow gold and crimson. And in that light, Liora saw not the girl she'd been, broken, collared, invisible, but the woman she'd become. A queen who ruled not through fear, but through fierce, unrelenting compassion. A healer who saw potential in damage and possibility in pain. A survivor who had learned that the strongest wolves weren't the ones who never fell, but the ones who got back up and helped others do the same. She had been the girl no one saw. Now she was the queen everyone remembered. And that, Liora thought, as she watched her daughter train below with the children of integrated exiles, was worth every scar, every tear, every moment of doubt. She had survived, she had transformed, and she had proven that the most revolutionary act wasn't violence or vengeance. It was choosing, every single day, to build something better than what tried to break you. The wolf who had waited so long to wake had finally found her purpose. Not in teeth and claws and domination, but in the radical, dangerous, world-changing power of refusing to let anyone, ever again, be called worthless.